Welcome to Celtic Medicine Stories, a podcast where we explore stories from the old Celtic lands, with the understanding that they carry medicine for us. I'm your host, Kat Horton, and I offer these stories in the spirit of the oral storytelling tradition of the British Isles. That is, they are free and they're open to everyone, always. Although these stories often have come from another time and have evolved through time with the oral storytelling tradition, they are here still for a reason. If you're curious about going deeper with this story, with the images, symbols, characters, landscapes, sounds, whatever it is that's speaking to you from this particular story, then there are some free resources below which will help guide you in that process. This story is from the Scottish borders where I grew up. It emerged into the lore of that land just a few miles down the road from the Eildon Hills, which was the setting of the Thomas the Rhymer story that I shared in the previous episode. It's a well-known folktale and was originally recorded as a ballad, one of the famous border ballads collected by Sir Walter Scott, who lived right there in this little area of the world that we're talking about. This story speaks to me of reciprocity between the worlds, the constant exchange back and forth between the world of the mortals and the other world, or the realm of the fairy. And the Queen of Feary, who we met in Thomas the Rhymer, shows up in this story in a much darker guise, but seems to maintain her role as initiator of men. Although the story focuses on a mortal woman, Janet, this woman who seeks adventure and shows herself able to stay the course, to hold on no matter what. And it's a gem of Borders folklore, and I'm really excited to share this telling of it with you. So as you listen to this story, as with all these Celtic medicine stories, let yourself float. You don't need to pay attention in the way maybe you were asked to do in school. You don't need to try and follow the plot line or the dialogue or anything in particular. In fact, the medicine lies in what you find yourself attending to. So when you let yourself go into that receptive, floaty state and you find your mind wanting to savor an image or a sound or a word, and you find yourself more engaged with that than whatever it is that I'm saying, then notice that. You don't need to analyze it or try and figure it out in that moment, but just notice it, that called your attention, because that's where the medicine lies. Wherever this story interacts with your story is what you're looking for. And I believe this is part of why these stories have been around for so long, is because they each interact with us in some special way. And so as you listen, just let yourself absorb it and notice which parts stick out to you. Deep in the heart of the Scottish borders, in those beautiful rolling green hills, there is an old wood. It's been there a very long time. And they say that somewhere deep in that old wood there is a clearing with the brightest green grass that you've ever seen. But you shouldn't see it, because this is a forbidden wood. This is not a wood that you should go into. Because within that clearing, with the very, very bright green grass, there is a well. And around that well grow roses of the most exquisite kind that you've ever seen. All summer long, roses growing in this beautiful clearing around the well. But it is owned by the fairies. This is their part of their world. And if you dare to enter, you will be charged some kind of a ransom. And there's all sorts of tales through the borders of people that have entered these kinds of places. Children that have entered and never come back. Or people that have entered and have to pay some kind of ransom to the fairies. So this particular wood is called Carterhall wood. At this particular time, was part of a large estate of a very wealthy lord. He had lots of knights and all sorts of people that kind of were around him and helped him do all the things, waging war on local tribes and all the sorts of things that knights and lords do. And he had a daughter. And this young lady she'd grown up there. She grew up in this hall
close to Carter Hall Woods her whole life. So she knew all these stories. She'd heard them all. And she was getting to an age where she's like, these are just stories. I don't believe this stuff. This is ridiculous. She was beginning to feel restless. You know how you do around that age, just wanting to get out a little bit, see something outside of her father's hall. Sick and tired of all these knights looking at her and sharpening their swords and getting drunk. And she's sort of over it. And she's like, I really got to go and do something. I just want to go for a walk in the woods. This was the 1st of May, spring. All the spring energies were flowing and things were starting to bloom and flower. And she felt that inside of herself too. And she's like, I'm not going to sit in this hall today. I'm going out to the woods. And so she braided up her hair and she lifted up her skirt and off she trotted. And she went into the woods, and she'd been there many times before. But today she was like, I'm going in. I'm going much deeper in. And she kept going. She started to notice how it's getting darker in the woods. It's thicker because nobody ever goes in here. A lot of undergrowth. And she's kind of hacking her way through these bushes. Just know where she's going. She's just going further and further and further. That's the call. Just go further. And eventually she tears through this bramble and she pops out into a clearing. There it is. The most exquisite, bright green grass she's ever seen. It's beautiful. She runs right to it. She wants to touch it. It's gorgeous. And in the middle, there's this well. And around it, these most amazing roses. Pinks and reds and whites and some with multicolors in them. Incredible. She can't believe her luck. What a beautiful place, and how ridiculous that she hasn't been here her whole life when it's really so close to the hall. So she bends down to smell one of these roses. Oh, what a perfume. She reaches over and she plucks a stem. And as she does that, a puff of smoke comes out of the well, and boom, standing in front of her is Tam Lin. And he is a fairy knight. Now you have to remember that this is a time when fairies were not, they hadn't been Disneyfied. Fairies were not little Tinkerbell things with wings and a little tiny wand twittering around. No. Fairies are bigger than us. They never get sick, and they're ridiculously strong. And they do not carry wands, they carry swords. This is one of those kind of fairies, and he's standing right in front of her. As she tries not to fall over and show that she's completely shocked and surprised, she tries to hold it together and just sort of looks at him and says, hello, what are you doing in my woods? And he says to her, well, my dear, I had the same question for you. Who are you to pluck this rose? Who are you to be in this part of the woods? You humans are not supposed to be here. And she said, well, my father owns all of this. I can go wherever I want. And he said, my claim to this land is much older than yours. She had heard stories. She'd heard many stories, but it's just coming back to her right now that she'd heard this story of a young boy who had disappeared in these woods over 200 years ago, and she was beginning to wonder if that was him. And he said to her, well, I'm going to need a ransom. And she didn't say anything. And he said, well, I'm gonna need a kiss. And so he reached over and he took her face and he kissed her gently. And she did not say no, and she did not push him away. And we don't know all of what happened after that, but we do know that she went back to visit many, many times over the next few months. So as spring blossomed into summer, she would braid up her hair, hike up her skirts, and trot off to Carter Hall Woods. And she would meet with Tam Lin. She would pluck a rose, and poof, he would appear. And she just got really curious and asked him lots of questions about what it was like to be a fairy and how he did stuff. And she got to learn quite a bit about him. And one day, coming towards autumn now, September maybe, the days are starting to soften. And her father looks at her and he says, my dear, you are with child, are you not? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. She didn't know what to say. She didn't realize that people could tell that. And he said to her, my dear, whichever one of these nights it is, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Just go get him and we'll get the two of you married. She said, it's not one of these ridiculous nights. I don't want to marry one of your knights. And he said to her, well, you better go and get whoever it is so we can get you married. So she braided up her hair. She hiked up her skirts. And off she trotted into Carter Hall Woods. She called Tam Lin. And she told him the situation, all of it, the full thing. I gave a big sigh and said, my dear, you know that I would marry you if I could. But I can't. I'm a fairy, and there is a spell cast upon me. I must do the bidding of the fairy queen. I have no choice. If she calls me, I have to go. I cannot stay here, and I cannot be married to you. And this young girl said to him, she's a smart one. She said, every spell can be broken. How do we break yours? And he said, well, you're right. There is a way to break the spell, but it's not easy. She said, tell me, what is it? He said, well, there's one chance a year. It's on Samhain, October 31st. It's one night where there's a chance to break the spell. And it's when all the fairy knights come out and they join the wild hunt. And I'll be one of them. She says, okay, well, what do we have to do? And so he said to her, so on this night, you must come and you must hide yourself at Miles Cross, just up the road, where the knights will parade by. She said, okay, that doesn't sound hard. He said, wait, there's much more. You will see, firstly, you will see a whole collection of knights going by on horses. And this first group of riders will be led by a knight on a big black horse, and they'll be riding. You'll see that. Do not let them see you. Okay? Got it? Let them pass. And then a second group will come, not too far behind them, but this one will be led by a rider on a big brown horse. Do not let them hear you. Got it. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Let that group pass. Now, the third group that comes will be led by me, and I will be on a big white horse. And you will know it's me for sure because I will have a glove on one hand and not a glove on the other hand. Okay. Okay, Janet, so this is where it gets hard. You're going to have to pull me off the horse, and you're going to have to hold on to me no matter what. She said, okay. And he said, I don't know what will happen, but the fairy's queen's magic is strong. It's very strong. And she will do whatever she can to tear us apart. And all you have to do is hold on no matter what. Just hold on. She said, okay, I can do it. And he said, at some point, you'll see flames. And when you see flames, throw them in the well that's right there at Miles Cross. And I will emerge. And you'll have to wrap your cloak around me. And then it's done. And she said, okay, all right, I'm in. Let's do it. So as that night drew near, she got herself ready. And as it started to get dark, which it does early in Scotland at that time of the year, she was already ready, even though the appointed hour, the time of midnight, was still many hours away. She was ready. She had her cloak on. She had her boots on. She got her hair braided up, and she was ready to go. And she took the walk from her father's hall down to Miles Cross. And she rustled around there for a while. She knew she had a time to wait, but she found a good hiding spot. She waited and waited and waited and waited and waited, and it seemed like forever. She kept waiting behind these bushes till eventually she heard it. She heard the drumming of horses, hoofs on the ground, a lot of horses. She could hear them coming. She pulled her cloak in over her head and she crouched down behind the bush and she got very, 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 very still. And she just peeked one eye out just to make sure. Yep, there he is. That rider on the big black horse. That's it. That's the first group. And she stayed totally still. And they passed. They did not see her. Whew. Good. Okay. First one down. And she waited a little longer, but not too long, because then she heard it again. Here they come, more horses. She could hear the hoofbeats on the ground. So as they drew close, she held her breath. But she waited for them to pass by. She dared not breathe. And they passed by and they did not hear her. 2 down, 1 to go. So she took a little pause, but not for long, because she heard it again. The horse's hoofs on the ground, coming closer and closer and closer and closer. And she got up on her feet. She's still crouched down, but she's on her feet and she's ready. And as soon as he comes into sight, she can see him on the big white horse. He's got one glove on his one hand and the other hand is naked. And she, as he comes up, she launches herself out the bushes and she grabs a hold of Tam Lin and she pulls him down off the horse until they're both on the ground. And a huge uproar goes up. All of the knights, all of the riders, he's down, Tam Lin's down. Screeching and rearing of horses, total chaos. And she hears the Queen of Fairies come galloping up on her big black horse. And the Queen of Feary yells at Tam Lin, "Rider, get back on your horse." And Janet just holds on to him. And she feels his body starting to shake. And he's starting to shake. And she just holds on and holds on. And his body's getting smaller. She doesn't know what's happening, but she's like squeezes her arms around him just to hold on to him. And she realizes he's turned into some kind of eel or serpent or something. He's this long, slimy, slippery, scaly thing. She's holding on to him. And she can feel him trying to wrap around her neck, almost trying to strangle her. She just keeps holding on to this giant eel. And then she feels his body starting to shake again. He's shaking and she just hold on. That's all she can do. Hold on. And she feels his body starting to swell now, to grow to this big, enormous size. And he's furry. And there's this smell. What is that? It's a bear. And she feels the claws in her arms as his claws are digging into her arms and the blood starting to run down her arms. She doesn't let go. She just holds on like she said she would. She's just holding on to him. And he's gnawing, scratching at her arms, and she just holds on. And she feels his body starting to shake again. And this thing's changing again. The fur is different now. He's still furry, some big furry thing. And then she feels these teeth on her head and smells this hot, meaty breath, this lion that is like clamped down on her head and feels like he's about to bite into her skull. And all she does is hold on. That's all she can do. And then she feels his body shaking again. And then there's something incredibly hot, like a hot poker in both of her hands. And she's gripping it tight, and it's burning into the palms of her hands. And when she thinks she can possibly not hold on for a moment longer, it turns into a burning, flaming branch. And she recognizes it. This is it. Okay. She throws it into the well. She's busy looking at her hands to see how bad the damage is. They hurt a lot. Big steam is coming out of the well. And as she looks up at the noise of it, out of the water steps Tam Lin. And she remembers, she takes her cloak off and throws it around him, for he's naked. And as she does that, the fairy queen comes screeching up again. Tam Lin, get back on your horse. And he looks at Janet and he says, "Come on, my love, let's go home." And the two of them walk away, and she can do nothing. The fairy queen, nothing. The spell is broken. And she gathers her riders and they screech off into the night. Tam Lin turns to Janet and says, "Let's go tell your father that we're going to get married." And so it was. or at least so they say it was.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Celtic Medicine Stories. If you want to go deeper, check out my Working with Archetypes free email course. There's a link somewhere in these notes. You'll find it. And feel free to visit on my website, kathoughton.com, KATHOUGHTON.com. I'd love to hear from you. Go well.